I'm going to give you my 10 guys that I think the Jaguars should look at in free agency. Not all 10 are going to come here, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. A quick note, you can find us wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you check out wherever you look or listen. We will be there for you. By the way, my name is Tony Wiggins. I got to tell y'all that just in case you aren't here all the time. And I'm also letting you know that today's show is brought to you and sponsored by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And shout out to the everydayers for joining us here on Locked On Jaguars. We really, really do appreciate you. All right, here's what we're going to do. This is the last show of the week, so it is prior to the early tampering period and all of that for free agency. So I decided with what I know or what I think I may know and what I've been able to juxtapose by using a little bit of reasoning. Didn't get this from anybody in the building, didn't hear this from anybody else. Here are some of the things that I want to discuss today, mainly about the free agency. There's a serious rush to judgment about James Gladstone already from some people, and I think it's flat out ridiculous because he traded Christian Kirk inside of the division. I get it. A lot of people don't like that. I understand that too, but we'll discuss that in just a second. Mitch Morse retired after we did the show, our yesterday's show. I did happen to mention that and put out a little bit of information on that. I'll tell you what the ramifications are for that. More than anything, I thought that if they let Luke Fortner go, that he would be a dude that they kept around as a vet to make sure that they can get him from one game to another if their starter, whoever that might be in the near future, did not work out, but he's not here. But first, we're going to talk about the 10 best free agents for the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is not what I think they will do. I'm going to be very clear. This is not what I think they will do, because if I tell you what I think they're going to do, I just really just be guessing. I might as well just be flipping coins because I don't know what they're going to do, right? There are rumors about a couple of guys on this list that we will talk about. Center was already first on the list for me, center and guard. And really, if y'all want to get me started, I'd say center and two guards and maybe even a tackle, but we know that's not realistic. I'm going with Drew Dahlman as number one. And I know that there was a report that Pete Prisco was on the radio here. And Pete, I love Pete. I respect him. We talk about the different blocking schemes, whether it's zone or gap. I don't know what the Jaguars are going to do, right? Sean McVay, for years, was a big outside zone guy. And then he started running some gap stuff. And I even got a quote here from Dan Campbell that will give you an idea of exactly what I mean by that. So I had to reach out to some people and find out some information. Dan Campbell basically said in an interview, he said how hard it was to stop the offense for the Rams. And I'll pull that up for you here in just a second. But here in the first part of this quote that I'm going to pull up, this article says that we're talking about the Rams run offense, says that Sean McVay used to be one of the primary purveyors of outside zone runs, but that's changed exponentially in recent years. In 2023, they run behind gap blocking schemes on 42% of their snaps, which ranks fifth in the league. All right, so they say the Rams ran 29% of they ran gap on 29% of their attempts, which ranked 20th in 2022. And in 2021, they ran 20%. So that means that some people do both, right? And I can understand that from that perspective. I even reached out to a former NFL offensive lineman that I know, and then I called an executive that has built staffs, and they pretty much told me what I'm going to tell you in just a second. Here's Dan Campbell talking about, I believe this is Dan Campbell, talking about Sean McVay. I'll take that back. This actually is Dan Campbell. Lions head coach Dan Campbell is well aware of the challenges no matter how the Rams run the ball. This is in 2023. This is a quote now. I do know this, the crossover tape and some of the things I have seen, number one, they are still explosive on offense. They've been explosive. They're play action pass game. But what's making it so dangerous, their run game. That's what's showing up. They've got a pretty dangerous run game. This mid zone they're running a lot more gap than they have previously. So that's kind of where it all begins with them. And you put that with Stafford's ability to push the ball down the field, and it's dangerous. So that's telling you that there's some flex. The only time, and this is what someone told me earlier, one of the two people that I had spoken with earlier, they said the problem is that's more of an issue for a guard. Like if one guy is better at zone than he is at gap, that's something that they look at when it comes time to draft people, and it's not one of those deal breakers, as opposed to it's just one of those things. Okay, we're going to put these guys in the best position based on what we already have. The way it was explained to me is this: it's a bigger problem for guards than it is for a center. And I asked why, and the way it was told to me was this: well, if a center is very good at zone and struggles at gap, then you probably don't want to put him there. If he's strong at gap, but he struggles at zone, then you probably don't want him to do too much of that. But if he's really good at one thing and okay at something else, then you can just run what you want to run. And then if there's a center that is light, like Luke Fortner, doesn't pack a punch, doesn't move his feet very well, then that makes him a little bit more limited. And then the guy told me this: Drew Dahlman ain't got no problems. He can do whatever you want him to do. So Atlanta runs a zone scheme. I wouldn't allow that to stop me from getting the best center on the market, especially when you don't have a legitimate center on this team. And Liam Cohen comes from a system where they have that little bit of flex where they can do one thing or another. Now, I know the other day I said, this isn't the season where you just kind of take something and start making people adapt to everything. This is where you can go get what you want. That's true unless there's a significant drop off from the best guy to the next guy. It's still players over plays. So think about that. That's why I have Drew Dahlman down as number one. The person had an issue with my guy at number two, and that was Will Fries, because he says he's a really, really good player. However, Will Fries, he's hurt a little bit more than people let on. He doesn't quite, he's not always on the field, not to the point where Tevin Jenkins is. Tevin Jenkins is probably going to have to get a prove-it deal, sort of like Mekhi Becton did last year. But you got to be a little bit concerned about the fact that he did end the season on IR. Number three for me, it's really a tie between Javon Holland and, for me, Justin Reed. And I tell you why. I want them to get a safety. I know everybody's making the Holland connection to this team, and I'm all for that, right? They're making the Holland connection, and he's a really, really rangy, good player. I always have problems with dudes that came back from an injury, though, and then had like the worst year of their career right before they hit free agency. So I wouldn't be upset if they moved in that direction, because they have a better idea, a better grasp of it, especially with Anthony Campanile knowing what Javon Holland is made of. But Justin Reed, when I mentioned Justin Reed's name to the personnel person that I spoke with, they said super solid all the way across the board. You can't go wrong with him. He's the kind of guy you want to give money to. So those are my four guys, right? The first four guys. My fifth guy is someone that I have heard they are connected with, but everyone else heard that. I didn't hear it myself on a personal level, but that's Carlton Davis. If that's who they want, I'm good with it. By the way, Jamar Chase said Carlton Davis was the toughest guard he's had. So he was the guy that was the toughest dude that he's had to play one-on-one. Davis big, strappy, man-to-man corner, really, really physical, and can get it absolutely done. I don't think the price is going to be too astronomical. So those are the first five of my wish list for the Jaguars. I'll get to the other five before I start discussing the trade of Christian Kirk along with Mitch Morse retiring, and then we'll get into this, tell everybody to pipe down and calm down just a little bit. We'll do all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is brought to you and sponsored by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, And there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on fourth quarter comebacks, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets with the same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3 at the right time. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly or immediately. How about that? Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we're rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. I've named 5 guys that I would be very, very pleased if the Jacksonville Jaguars were to go after them in free agency. Drew Dahlman, Will Fries, a combination of either or Javon Holland or Justin Reed. And I think I'm kind of leaning towards Justin Reed, to be honest with you, from my personal perspective. And then Chris Godwin, the wide receiver from Tampa. I know Godwin's coming off of an injury, but Godwin is someone they're very familiar with. The injury isn't a catastrophic injury, even though he's had 2 little nagging injuries now in the last few years. But I do think he's a big-time player. And I just try to match guys up in tandem. And I look at Brian Thomas Jr., and the thing that he needs that we hope Gabe Davis was going to provide last year, but maybe he still has a chance, is a big physical possession guy who can also run and make people miss. I don't think Gabe Davis does that as much as he is. I called him a seam killer when he was in Buffalo because he always found himself in the deep middle of the field. And I heard Jeff Lockerman say something today about how he's a good deep route runner, even though he's not fast. He understands the pace. He understands how to find it, when to make his cuts, and he always finds himself open in the middle of the field. You didn't see a lot of that last year, partly because Trevor got hurt, but even before that, the line just wasn't playing very well, and then they weren't able to run the ball to keep people honest. So maybe, Davis is on the books for $20 million in terms of a cap hit. It is really counterintuitive to let him go. Why not just bring him in, see if you can get a whole bunch of stuff out of him? I'm sure that the brass and the coaches, they have a pretty much of a good book on him. And I hope what that means is they give him at least a shot to come in here and do what he's supposed to do. But I wouldn't be upset if they entered the season with BTJ, Gabe Davis, and Chris Godwin. I really wouldn't be. Let's get to the other 5 people. Some of these folks now are not people who are like frontline players. All right. I'll remind you of that. This is almost what I didn't do necessarily, except for the safety position, is just go from, okay, if they don't get that guard, go to the next one. I didn't, because I don't know if they'll prioritize it that way. I think they'll go from a guard or a center that's a really good player, and then they may not stay within that parameters of that position. They just may go to the next best player that helps them and then change their focus a little bit on draft day. Aaron Banks. And I know people are going to be like, well, why the 49ers letting him go? Well, 1, the 49ers ain't got no money. But 2, folks were still complaining about their offensive line. Banks isn't a great player, but what he is really, really good at is the run. And he's like 325 pounds. And I just think back to hearing Liam Cohen say, when we break the huddle, they're going to see us. And they have to run the football. So Aaron Banks would be sort of a fallback option for me if they don't get Will Fries, and they could plug him in at right guard. I think he's a little bit more adept to moving and pulling than, say, a Mekhi Becton, who I really like. But I wouldn't be surprised if they, had a cup of coffee with him also. But I just envision, when I watch the Tampa tape, I envision guys moving around, and I don't necessarily think that that's Mekhi Becton's strength. So I'm going to get a dude that has played in a zone scheme again, another guy who's played in his own scheme. And by the way, this is what I also heard. I heard the center would be more, if you have 2 good guards that can really do what they're supposed to do, that'll help the center out if he's switching from zone to gap. So, yeah, I'll go with him. And now you notice we're getting into this second tier of people and of players I believe they can help, because you do have to field the team. And the Jaguars right now don't have a starting right guard, and they don't have a center that anybody has any confidence in. Defensive line. I'm going to go to defensive line here, and I'm going to say Big Bobby Brown not Bobby Brown from New Edition, Bobby Brown from the LA Rams. Bobby Brown, 6'5", 330 pounds, right? And he doesn't offer much of pass rush. I think the Jaguars have enough guys if they focus on that 3 technique position, especially if Mason Graham or somebody like that is still in play in the top 5. I think they need a designated run stuffer, a big beef eater. I like Devon Hamilton. I might like Devon Hamilton, though, as a dude that takes 40% of the snaps as opposed to a guy that's the main guy in base. I think in base you have to be able to stop the run first, and I think Bobby Brown has done that at a pretty good clip for the Rams. He started on their team. He played a lot. Didn't get a whole bunch of statistics, and then I saw on social media where they were talking about how good of a player he was and said these are free agents. And Bobby Brown kind of took issue with it and saying, hey, I could rush the passer, but y'all don't really let me do it. Whatever. All right. I don't think he's going to cost a whole bunch of money. And I do know that there are people that will be in the building that are very familiar with him. And if you want to get a dude in there that'll provide a lot of depth, a lot of size for you, and basically give you the opportunity to be very, very good in short yardage, I think Bobby Brown would be a guy. I told you all these picks weren't going to be sexy, right? All right, let's move on. The next one is a bit of a combination also, but really I'll tell you who I prefer. And that is to find your third edge rusher, a veteran in free agency. So there's 2 guys, Azeez Ojulari, who you've heard a lot about, who is a designated pass rush specialist. And then there's Chauncey Golston. Chauncey Golston played with Dallas, had to play a lot because of injuries, and played really, really well considering he's a good player. Now, Dallas has signed OO. That's what I call him. I think his name is Odigizua. They have re-signed Osa out in Dallas, given like $21 million a year, right? And that's kind of, with all of the things that they have to do and the things that they need, they made a choice. Chauncey Golston was chosen a few picks after him. They both played well. The other kids played a little bit better, probably played more extensively. But Chauncey Golston is 6'6", 6'5", 6'6", goes about 265, 270. He's really good against the run, and he does provide you some edge setting and some pass rush. I think his body type looks a lot like the 2 guys that they have right now. And I think for not very much money, he could give you an experienced player that you can plug in and count on, for 25, 30% of the snaps for this ball club, especially on passing downs when you move guys inside in long down and distance situations. So Chauncey Golston is the one that I prefer of those 2. But for housekeeping purposes, I listed them both. And finally, my last guy is, if you don't get Chris Godwin, Darius Slayton. And I don't think Slayton's going to cost you as much. He doesn't have the history of injuries that Chris Godwin has. And I don't think he's as good of a player, but he is fast. So if you want to go speed on speed, I think Darius Slayton is somebody you can look at. He's going to cost you now. He might cost you somewhere around the same kind of money Gabe Davis cost you, but there's a way that you can structure that so that at least you can push some of the accounting part of that contract till next year. And if Davis doesn't work out, you can make a move. But I have seen Darius Slayton, who had 700 yards in 4 of his first 5 seasons, catching the ball in New York from Daniel Jones. Bad quarterback play, bad offensive line play, and he was still very, very productive. He's fast, a little bit of a body catcher, but he has no drops, in the tapes that I watch. So that's not really a problem. 6'1", 192 pounds. You're familiar with him if you watch the Southeastern Conference because he played at Auburn. It's not sexy, but it makes that room just that much better. And it leaves you in a situation where, and he can line up in the slot and he can line up outside, but it leaves you in a situation where you're not stuck going into the draft depending on yet another rookie. And there's nothing wrong with that, except that teams want their units, each room on their team, to have a little bit of mix of guys with experience, youth, cagey, the difference in size and versatility. So those are my guys, man. Those are the dudes that I hope, I would not be shocked to see the Jaguars go after. I have been mentioning a guy named Isaiah McDuffie, who's a special teams ace and a linebacker. He re-signed with Green Bay 2 years at about $9 million. So they kept their guy that they really, really love. And I thought because Campanile was his position coach that was an opportunity. And then there's Ernest Jones. There's another guy, linebacker that the Rams drafted. They traded him last year, probably because they felt like It was his last year of his contract, and they weren't going to be able to re-sign him. So he goes to the Titans, and then the Titans traded him at the deadline to Seattle. I'm just weary of anybody that's been on 3 teams in 1 year, and he's still a first contract dude. That kind of shocks me and scares me a little bit. But I don't think it'll cost a whole bunch. And I know that there's probably some familiarity there also with James Gladstone. In fact, I can bank on it that's what it is. And he's probably a depth piece, and he's probably a dude you try to get under contract because you got 2 guys that'll be free agents at the linebacker position next year. All right, let's talk about Kirk and Mitch Morse. Christian Kirk and Mitch Morse no longer Jaguars. They did it in 2 different ways. We'll discuss that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, moving along here, the last show before we get to the tampering period and all of the things that you're going to hear over the weekend. And, there's going to probably be a tampering period for the tampering period, right? And I think there might be already one that's underway. A lot of people out there that's available, right? Christian Kirk was said to be released yesterday from the Jaguars, but then today we find out before that was actually executed that the Jaguars traded him for a 7th-round pick to the Houston Texans. Lots of folks have a problem with the fact that they traded him within the division. I don't have a problem with it at all, because if you're going to get rid of him, you probably don't care where he goes. You probably feel like you're going to upgrade anyway. So therefore, he keeps his $16 million salary this year. The Jaguars, I believe, are on the hook for like $10 million. I keep getting conflicting reports that if I asked my personnel guy, is there such thing as a June 1st trade designation? He said, I didn't think it was, but there was one formula on Spot Track that I used that said that the cap figure went down. I mean, the savings went down to nearly $7 million by them trading him. There are folks saying that they're going to eat the whole contract. I don't even know what that means, because it's the last year of a 4-year contract. So all of the amortizations are gone. There's a $5 million roster bonus amortization. That means where they took the initial $20 million and they spread it over the life of the contract, which was 4 years. So it's counted 5 years on each year that he's been under contract. Well, that was still going to be there regardless. The rest of it is probably the rest of either a restructure that he did in 2024, or sometimes they kick the can down the road a little bit, or the rest of the guaranteed portion of the contract. But normally, if that's in salary, that's taken by the other team. I do know that come the second week of March, I believe there was a $1 million roster bonus also. So I don't think the savings are really going to matter very, very much in the grand scheme of things, with the cap going up and the Jaguars already having space. But I will tell you that this whole thing about whether they're eating the whole contract up, if the contract wasn't guaranteed, the Jaguars weren't going to eat it anyway. The only thing that they were going to probably end up doing was having to make a tough decision. That's why the rumor that they tried to renegotiate with him was to lower that number to see if they could keep him. And then when he didn't want to lower the number, and I probably wouldn't have either, if my agent who does the work for me says, look, they can trade you and somebody else will eat that entire contract, and you're going to get that this year without a renegotiation, or that team may renegotiate it, but that means you're going to get fresh cash. You're not going to get less than what it already is. So at 29 years old, that's what you do. You take the most money, and I don't blame him for absolutely doing that. Mitch Morse retired, announced his retirement today. I do not know if this came on the heels of the Jaguars telling him that they were looking to replace him, or that they wanted him in another role, and maybe if he could reduce things a little bit. I don't know. But all I'm telling you is, I, at the very least, thought if they did anything, they move on from Luke Fortner and use Mitch Morse as a backup to a new center. Hopefully it was Drew Dahlman, with all due respect to anybody that think he doesn't fit here. But apparently, there's no information out there about that. He's just going to call it quits after 12 years. And he's certainly had a good career, and we appreciate him for the year of service that he had to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The ramifications are now this. If they don't believe in Luke Fortner, then they need 2 centers. They need a starter and a backup. I got a feeling that they were probably going to address that in the draft anyway. But yeah, that's what it is. I think now, unless you want to go into the year with Luke Fortner as your backup, I think they might have to hit that spot twice. once in free agency and then another one in the development, or at least get people that can cross-train, that can do multiple things to come in here. Maybe it could be another veteran. Maybe they go that way and sign someone like maybe an Austin Corbett or somebody like that. I don't know who all the guys are that may be available in free agency, but I do know there's a substantial gap between Drew Dahlman and anybody else on this list, like guys like Coleman Shelton from the Bears. The Bears are looking to get rid of him anyway. Josh Myers, Austin Corbett is a veteran who is out there at 29 years old. Once again, none of these guys are good players. Ryan Kelly is available. He's almost 32 years old. I don't know if he's going to be somebody that they go after or not. But certainly the only one of these guys that looks like that they may be ready to get a really, really good contract is Drew Dahlman at 6'3", 300 pounds, and he's a devastating run blocker from everything that I've heard. So a lot coming up this week, man. There's a lot to get into, a lot to do. I'm going to be very interested to see how the Jaguars move and how they proceed throughout free agency. You'll be able to get all of that coverage here on Locked On Jaguars and Locked On NFL as well. Locked On NFL is the daily podcast where there's 2 shows each and every day. One with my man Tyler rolling early in the morning. The Madman will hit you like a double shot of espresso, and then you slide by about 2 o'clock every day on Locked On NFL, and you'll get me, Tony Wiggins, in the barbershop, just laid back like I always am, and just trying to get in everybody's business. You might even laugh occasionally. But that being said, make sure you check out Locked On NFL wherever you get your podcast, whether you watch it or listen to them. You guys have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. We'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.